Today we're here with Mr. Russell Means and his lovely wife Pearl Means, and this is a very important and pivotal interview because of the incredible body of work that this incredible, extraordinary man has put together over the years in order to address the social justice issues that exist right here in the heart of America. Mr. Means, would you please give the audience a small rundown of what's happened over the years, beginning at or about the 1973 Wounded Knee Uprising that you were a huge part of, if not the leader of?
Well, as a leader of the American Indian movement, which began in the late 60s, 1968 to be exact, we had a collective leadership because there were many different nations. And we had chapters in the United States and in Canada among different American Indian people. But non-Indians were also welcome and a part of. Our main goal was self-determination for Indian communities, anywhere and everywhere. Because there wasn't a national advocate for Indian people in North America, we felt we could fill that void, and we did, overwhelmingly successful. We chose a strategy of political confrontation. In other words, we were not going to turn the other cheek and bend over and get the other two kicked. That was our mantra.
Right.
And if someone slapped us, they better be prepared for self-defense. Or offense, as the case in the United States is concerned. But what we did was confront. You see, we are a people in the United States, and in fact the world, a people who are out of sight, out of mind. This goes for the entire hemisphere. Out of sight and out of mind. Therefore, the strategy of political confrontation was the only avenue available to us. We didn't have political power, we did not have economic power, we didn't have any kind of power, economic power, nothing. All we had was the fact we were not afraid of the consequences of our actions, because our actions were always based on truth. Mm-hmm. Truth and the law. Mm-hmm. None of us were lawyers. A few of us were ex-convicts. In fact, the founders of the American Indian movement were ex-convicts.
Were they convicted? Did they have convictions based upon confrontational behavior due to this cause specifically?
No.
They were just in general?
Yeah, the social atmosphere of Indian reservations and Indian communities, be they urban or suburban, were such, the poor people's lot as to have confrontation with the law continuously. So they ended up as ex-convicts, and in the prison system they realized there had to be a better way. And no one was championing them, but they saw champions for the black people, for the white people, for the Christians, for this and that. So they consequently came out of prisons and formed the American Indian movement, and then I joined. So
you're actually breaking over into something I was going to talk about later on, but there's been a certain amount of social criticism of the different paths that you've tried to get attention, to raise attention to what's happening, what's been happening for over 155 years of broken treaties. And they've called you at times very hateful names, actually. They called you militant or radical. What is your answer to that? Don't you feel that there needed to be a radical response to the radical way that it's malignant neglect, is it not?
Well, the word radical comes from a Greek word radik, which means speaking the truth, essentially.
Well said.
So I'm very proud to be called a radical. I'm very proud to be called, but we consider ourselves patriots, American Indian patriots.
That's right.
And we adhere to the law.
Yes.
So when we confronted the powers that be in whatever strata of politics or society or government they were in, be it the churches, be it the government, be it the police, be it anyone, we used the law. Mm-hmm. We knew exactly what was going to happen when we went in. And like I said, we did so without fear.
I'd like to bring something up, and this is kind of organic. It's not actually not on my list of questions, and if for this fine with, but I just for my own sake, I would like to know, you know, to you discuss the refusal to accept the whole perfect victim syndrome. That is to say, never fighting back, never raising your hand, taking whatever you're given, or enduring that which is taken away. I can't help but think about my own culture, which is Jewish, and we were for many years perfect victims. There, you know, we went to gas chambers and horrible things, and then finally, when the state of Israel was established, essentially we got our land back, as you were trying to do in a very fundamental way, as in self-government and everything else. The attitude did change. The attitude was, we're not doing that anymore. You know, if you slap us, we're going to hit you back. You know, and so the public perception changed. And I'm wondering, if you see parallels at all between the two, or is it not really?
Oh, there's definite parallels. When I joined the movement, I was in Cleveland, Ohio. Mm-hmm. The richest community in America was called Heights. Mm-hmm. It's a Jewish community in Cleveland. And there was blatant discrimination against the Jewish people and the black people. This is at the time in the 60s when the blacks were rioting after Martin Luther King's death. And in 1968, when I arrived there, I found the parallels ordinary. In fact, I became acquainted with an ally with a Zionist woman. And she assisted us at the Indian Center, but the point being, in our discussions about our struggles, it was just right there, parallel.
Interesting. Do you think it's a common thread with all disenfranchised or most disenfranchised people, or do you think that, for instance, the African Americans, Jewish and other minority groups that immigrated here, and Native American Indians who were discriminated from the very beginning before all of us got over here, do you see a common thread with all of them, or do you see stronger?
What I see in the world, both its history and contemporary actions that it's going through now, everything is cultural. Mm. It's not a racist thing based on skin color or odor or any such nonsense as that. It's built upon simply, I mean, there was gross alleged racism in Europe for centuries against one another.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Yeah, that's right.
But that's an excuse. It's really cultural differences that cause the friction. Unfortunately, the bedrock reason of which no one will accept is patriarchy. Patriarchy raised its ugly head a little over 6,000 years ago. And since then, we've become a people, a culture, if you will, worldwide now, fear of the outside world, fear of losing our conveniences. So patriarchy is a pyramidal system with the man on top. His religions are the same way. His governmental structures, his social structures, everything's built, his family structure on the pyramid, the man at the top. Which means if he's at the top, he's alone. That makes him fearful. He doesn't want to lose control. So he has to go after control. Now if he has one child, it's easier to control. The more children he has, the more fear he has.
Herding cats.
Exactly.
I've had 10 children, so I know that feeling, actually.
But think of the basic premise of the patriarch, and he hasn't come out of the cave. He still believes that the only way to settle a misunderstanding is with a club.
Right.
Albeit today it's a very sophisticated club. Clubs.
It has legal intonations.
But the point being, the result, the cause and effect is the same.
As opposed to a more egalitarian or matriarchal society?
Matriarchal. I mean, we lived for millions of years.
I love this.
We lived for millions of years. You know, every culture that has been around for tens of thousands of years has remnants of matriarchy, like the Jewish people.
Absolutely.
They still follow the lineage of the woman.
Absolutely.
Well, that's matriarchy. But if that's the only thing left of matriarchy, it's sad.
It is, yeah, that's right.
It's sad.
And it also depends upon how far away you get from those cultural roots.
In view of, from my perspective, I think of it in terms of the great falling away from the vast majority of Jewish people falling away from ancient culture and customs and things that we hold very dear. In terms of Native Americans, I see the horrible lack of elders in your communities, with especially as you were saying once before, in the Pine Ridge area, you're number 4 on the worst the lifespan. Yeah, for men and women, as I understand it, the life expectancy is lower than everywhere except for maybe 3 African countries. Isn't that right?
If you extrapolate AIDS, we have the lowest life expectancy on Earth.
Oh my God!
If you include AIDS, there are 8 countries in Africa whose life expectancy is shorter than ours.
Okay, so it just gives me chills. I'm sorry, it's just so offensive. Because here we are, in the heart of one of the richest countries in the world. How is it that a country like this can stand up and threaten to go to war in other countries across the seas because of social injustice issues, when we have the third world conditions right here in the center of our own country? That's appalling to me. What are your thoughts on that?
The thoughts, we're still matriarchal. We're a huge fear. They cannot allow matriarchy to be reborn because the men lose control. So, we are in the United States of America the most hated people alive. And the only way they can keep the hatred intact and their policies intact is to keep us out of sight, out of mind. They cannot no longer, because we were just too tough. You know, when a natural animal is cornered, they will use whatever means necessary. We are natural animals, human beings. And so And that's what Wounded Knee in 1973 was all about. We were in a corner culturally, and that means our essence was in the corner, our very survival as a distinct people. There's not going to be any problem with Indians becoming brown Americans. I don't care about that, because that means not only are we brown Americans, but we've bought into the patriarchal world, which it's almost successful now. So,
Assimilation, you mean?
yeah, assimilation,
How does that make
colonization. That's why I cut my hair. In our way, my people's way, we cut our hair because we know that hair holds memory. So when people close to us die, we cut our hair to shorten the mourning part, shorten the memories, so that we can get on with mourning and get on with life. So I cut my hair because my people are dying.
Is it a sign of giving up hope?
They've given up hope.
So, do you mourn their giving up hope, or have you yourself also lost?
I haven't lost hope. Never lose hope. Because one of my ancestors, Black Elk, a famous man, spiritually and philosophically, and intellectually studied in universities. There's a book out about him, Black Elk Speaks. Yes. And in that book, he says, one small root of the sacred tree of life may still be of life. We must find that root, nourish it so that the tree of life can once again blossom and mend our nation's hoop. I believe that. I've been looking for that root all my adult life. And I think I found it. I think I found it twice. One is our children, and number two is our language.
Absolutely.
Because our language is the essence of who we are. And that's true for the entire hemisphere. Now, unfortunately, you see, the American Indian on an Indian reservation in the United States of America is not a U.S. citizen per se. If you drive off the reservation, you become a U.S. citizen. If you go shop off of the reservation, you become a U.S. citizen. Once you return to that land that is yours, held in trust by the government, you are no longer a citizen. You are, in fact, a non-citizen. We have no citizenship rights on an Indian reservation. In fact, the entire legal theory about Guantanamo and enemy combatants was born out of Indian policy, American Indian policy.
That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
We have no rights on the reservation to habeas corpus.
Interesting. And how does that fit in with what's happening with your legal theory? I mean, I don't know what the latest status is, but I understand that you had full intention, or have full intention, of pursuing into court the constitutional elements that are being violated with the Native American peoples. How is that? What's the status of that now, and how does that play in?
Well, first of all, let me preface that with, I was once young and ignorant, and I thought the full extension of militancy was the way to go. So I fought against the capitalists in the United States of America at Wounded Knee, and we won. fought against the Sandinista communists in Nicaragua, and those Indians won. We have no problem defeating the white man militarily. It's afterwards that we cannot defeat him, economically, socially, or democratically. So what we looked at the law, we looked at our people. There are attempts at saving our languages, so that's intact. That struggle's intact. That's going to be a somewhat, that'll be easier to attain than anything else. But the struggle for freedom, the essence of being free is that you are free to be responsible. That's my definition. That's any true patriot's definition. It was the American Indian who gave the concept of to the world. No one knew that until the Europeans got over here, and after initial, they recognized, oh, wait a minute, this guy of life. Everyone has egalitarian rights. Women are free. And so all those Jesuit priests and ministers and Europeans who had emigrated or rode back to Europe, they wrote about the individual freedom of people, savages. And then the founders of the United States of America even quoted our way of life. And that we gave, in fact, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights comes directly from us.
Yes, that's right. That's historical.
So we look at the law. The United States of America is the biggest liar in the world and the most sophisticated con man in the world. So we looked at his laws. If we want to establish a continuing future for our people, then we have to admit to ourselves that he's a liar. Notice I didn't say she. He's a liar. So we've been to his courts. We've been to the oppressor, asking the oppressor not to suppress.
Perfect irony.
And of course, he's not going to change. We're allowed to enter his world of patriarchy and therefore become capitalists. We Indian people would be richer than the Saudis because all the mineral wealth and water and everything else of this country is on our land.
That's right. Natural resources.
So, we look at the law. Okay. We understand how powerful militarily and the police state that the United States of America is, so we want to have a peaceful, non-threatening movement now. So we withdrew from their laws because they're not living up to them. Right. Now we're taking a document, the treaties that we signed with the United States government, and we're taking it to the international community. All we're asking the international community, first step, because it's a step-by-step process, is to recognize the international instruments.
Right.
Once that's ascertained, now our first step, and we have one of the foremost, and it's Jewish, by the way, the foremost international legal minds in the world championing Richard Falk is championing our effort. He's the head lawyer. So we're going first to the Intercommission on Human Rights of the OAS, the Organization of American States. We Indian people, we've already been there on 5 other issues, and the Organization of American States has agreed with our position on every one of them. We've won the 5 cases.
Fantastic.
So this will be the 6th. All we're asking for is not the decision of right or wrong. But is this a valid international document, this
Right.
treaty?
Right.
So first, legally, we had to go to the United States of America. We went December 17th, 2007, and we officially withdrew. A delegation of my people officially withdrew from our treaty. Now, there's 370 other treaties with other Indian nations the United States made, but ours is the only one that withdrew. We withdrew from our treaties because of gross violations. Once we get the decision that we have a valid international document, then we take it to the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, of which the United States is not a member of. So politically,
Interesting. That's kind of a commentary on its own, is it not?
exactly, they're a dichotomy in world politics. So we're going to the ICJ. So countries don't have to be that much afraid of the pressure from the United States for any kind of decision the ICJ comes with. We're going to ask them the same question. Is it a valid international document?
Right.
Yes, it is. Then we go to the United Nations for various other legal maneuvers. One, we want observer status at the UN. Just observer status,
Right.
not nationhood.
Right.
The PLO has observer status. Other liberation movements around the world have or had observer status. So we would ask for observer status. This is a peaceful, nonviolent movement. And once we attain that, then we have individual communication with heads of state. And then we allies. Retribution
This is where it gets interesting.
from the United States of America. And that because they will be so embarrassed legally and morally
They'll have to do something.
and politically. Yes, they'll have to do something.
Because of the
And it also, as observer status, puts us in so we can accept international monetary and other types of assistance towards the rebuilding of our nation, our self-determination.
Outstanding.
So we're not trying to destroy the United States.
No, not at all. No, I understand completely.
I want to say it's a brilliant move, but at the same time, it seems as though it's the only move, isn't it? I mean, you've tried everything. You've tried peace, you've tried war, you've tried courts, you've tried everything, and nothing's worked. So it is amazing that you actually have to go outside of the United States. You have to go to the entire world to find some kind of justice. Stunning. I was reading, by the way, this is a fascinating, I've read hundreds of autobiographies, and hands down this is the most fascinating autobiography I've ever read. It is unbelievable. Your writing skills, your memories, your experiences, but what's so amazing about it is that you interweave the history. It's really a history book. I mean, it is an autobiography, but this is a history book. And the insider's view to what was really happening, not what the media said was happening, not what the United States was saying what was happening, but what was happening from the inside out on the reservations, and also well before they were, things degraded.
It is the only history book of our existence in the 20th century.
It's kind of appalling, actually. It is.
It's the only move, isn't it? I mean, you've tried everything. You've tried peace, you've tried war, you've tried
petition.
You've tried courts, you've tried everything, and nothing's worked. So it is amazing that you actually have to go outside of the United States. You have to go to the entire world to find some kind of justice.
Right.
Stunning. I was reading, by the way, this is a fascinating, hundreds of autobiographies, and the most fascinating autobiography I've ever read.
Thank
it is unbelievable. Your writing skills, your memories, your experiences, but what's so amazing about it is that you interweave the history. It's really a history book. I mean, it is an autobiography, but this is a history book. And the insider's view to what was really happening, not what the media said was happening, not what the United States was saying what was happening, but what was happening from the inside out on the reservations, and also well before they were, things of
It is the only history book of our existence in the 20th century.
That's
Isn't that sad?
Actually,
that's appalling.
It is. It
Good
is.
word.
You discussed Feather Necklace and talked about some of the poignant prophecies that were spoken about what was going to happen, what was coming, what was going to occur with the Native American peoples. And my question, I suppose, would be, what do you think Feather Necklace would say today, prophesying over what's going to happen in the future? And also, what would you say? How would you prophesy the future of your people?
I do not think my immediate ancestor, Feather Necklace, would say anything. I think he would cry. He would weep. And take on the feeling of... That's what I honestly think he would feel. But I wouldn't say anything. Me? I'm speaking for him. We never give up. As long as there is one Lakota, that one Lakota can find that sacred root of the tree of life, and our people can be reborn. Our value system, our matriarchy can be reborn. Everywhere you go in the world, matriarchy has been for 6,000 years under vicious attack. And you either bend and acquiesce or you're destroyed. It's happening in the Amazon, Indonesia, China, Russia, you go on and on and on. Norway, Scandinavia, Hawaii. But the Hawaiians and the Maoris, who are my inspiration, are the ones that are struggling. They're the ones who made me realize that it's our languages that make us who we are.
Yes.
That make us the matriarchs, that make us... there's some key measurements of being free. One is unanimity. No voting. You have no minority. A minority never suffers in our society. You have true individual freedom. I'll give you a little history lesson. Throughout our contact with the Europeans, we would capture, according to their history book, white women. Okay? In every instance, the white women did not want to return.
Yeah, I've read that many times. Yeah.
They never wanted to leave. These dirty savages, There's another thing that's curious. The Christians did not believe in bathing when they came over here. It was against Christian law to bathe.
Over there either. Let's just get this straight. This is not a hallmark of our culture, I assure you. Queen Elizabeth was known to have had exactly 3 baths in her whole life. I'm just saying.
Queen Victoria was...
Loved her to death, but...
It was... Catherine the Great was dragged kicking and screaming to the bathtub.
Yes, well. There's also a lot of rampant disease.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
At any rate, that's what they were right home with, these pagans. There's proof there's pagans. This is what Jesuit priests and ministers wrote back to Europe about. You can tell they're un-Christians and do not deserve the Christian belief because they insist on bathing every day.
sorry.
So I guess that's one thing we're thankful we gave to the white man.
Yeah, well.
The concept of baiting.
I wanted to ask you also, because you were talking about the root, finding that root, which was that was very well put, and it immediately brought me back to the birth of the white buffalo several years back. Do you remember this? And so many people because it wasn't 16 full generations or something since the last one, and they hoped that perhaps this was a sign. What are your thoughts on that? You don't think that was?
That was
there?
Okay. That buffalo calf, first of all, was the male calf.
And according
The
to
sacred one
was
is
not.
female.
That's a bit of a problem. I think, yeah, okay. So
After 6 months, that calf, before it was
changed
full grown,
colours. Changed colours, I remember that, yeah. That was kind of confusing to me. I thought, wait a minute. I thought it was, yeah.
it kind of exposed some of the charlatans among our own people too. You know, there was these medicine men who rushed over there and did all kind of sacred things and everything. Months later, it turns brown and it's the wrong sex. Yeah?
Oh. Yeah, I think I would throw a ringer and things. So let me ask you this, because this is what caught my attention about it. Because when it started changing colors and things, but I remember that there was something I was very inspired. No, I'm a little embarrassed to say it after you said that. But I was very, and this is why I was inspired. It was the first time I saw any semblance of large-scale unity among Native Americans. And it hit me after I saw that there's a massive problem with having a sense of unity among Native Americans. They'll argue who's in charge, and I don't know. There's a great deal of disunity that I can't account for. Can you talk to me about that? What needs to happen to create a more codified, stronger? Is there the chance that the 7 council fires could be reestablished? Is there a way to ever go back there?
There's a way to go back, but it's a long way. There's no surefire shortcut. And the problem is colonization. You know, we had 80 years of boarding schools where every year, every Indian child was taken from its family and forced into a militarized, either Christian or government boarding school.
Eurocentric schools.
And that's what I tell them, our history through my family, my own parents' experience. And that forced acculturation. You know, how do you destroy a people? First, you outlaw their spirituality. Second, you steal their children. And third, you do not allow them to leave their open-air prison.
And fourth, outlaw their language.
Fourth, outlaw their language.
Yeah. It takes away everything that you're...
It takes away your essence.
Everything, right.
Everything. But we didn't knuckle under, you know, we went underground, so to speak, literally, really, with our spirituality. And that changed a little bit. But it's the education that has crippled us. That forced education. I mean, if you're not allowed a history, you don't know who you are. You haven't a prayer. Fortunately for us, you know, we live naturally, so consequently our elders, my elders, now I'm an elder, you know, 72 winters old, but my elders were healthy men and women. They ate well, and they never went to school. Or they were raised by people who had never went to school. They were raised by people. I'm just one generation away from the people my ancestors who were born free. One generation's all. I'm very proud of that. And so I got to know a lot of those old people who never went to school, who had a completely different worldview than the rest of the world that I came to know.
How much of it is based upon oral tradition, and how does the education differ? Is it because of the telling of stories and allowing children to explore those and explore their histories, or is it hands-on, showing them how to be in the world? How does this explain for the people listening what the priorities are and how they're fundamentally different from
Well, the language.
the white education?
Number one, the language is a musical language. And our language depends on music. The other thing is that it's our environment. It's where we come from. It's how we know the world. It's how we know the universe. See, we never took the stunted go of the patriarch and defined time by the patriarchal worldview of one star and this planet that goes around it. That's a very kindergartenish approach to the universe.
Absolutely.
We define time from the maternal side, not the paternal side. The maternal side is nocturnal. It is the night. It is the universe. The universe revolves 280 days. That coincidentally is the gestation time of a woman's pregnancy. You want to talk to someone who is holy, it's the woman. So that's what matriarchy in essence is all about, is our relationship with the universe. It gives us an understanding of how to live on this world and in this world. We knew we came from the stars to the water to life on earth. That's in our creation stories. We don't call it science. And the seven sisters. It just goes on and on. But then our language encompasses what is around us in our universe. For instance, and I just finished a book, my second book. If you don't know the names of the clouds, if you don't know the names of the clouds, you have lost your way.
Interesting.
So we had 52 names for clouds that come over the northern plains. The northern plains of the United States. In reality, in our world, it's the clouds that come over the central plains, because the plains go all the way into Mexico and into Canada. We live in the central plain. Well, anyway, that was the Serengeti of North America. Those clouds, because we knew the names and we knew the winds, we could accurately tell the weather up to 2 days. The Weather Channel, without its meteorology, can't even be accurate up to 12 hours.
Now they're right at least half the time. But I guess that's the same as flipping a coin, isn't it? Maybe that should be our meteorological device.
So that's how important our languages are. It tells us how to live, how to be polite. And we can't answer them. There's no swear words. There isn't.
I love that.
There's no swear, but here's
Some civilization after all.
here's the other key. Not only do we have no swear words, but we have no word for war or warrior. And that's up and down this hemisphere. There isn't an Indian nation in the entire Western Hemisphere with the word war or warrior. Without the word, you do not have the concept. And I challenged the American Anthropological Archaeological Association at their triennial convention years ago, a couple decades ago. I stood up before them And I challenge them to bring forth one weapon of war from a pre-Columbian grave that they have robbed. Bring forth one weapon of war. I said, I will commit suicide right here in front of you.
Fascinating.
No, I've never, at that time I'd never been to South America. I'd been to Central America, not South America. So I didn't know. But I know my people. I know my people, and I know our languages. So I was pretty confident that
Fascinating.
we had no weapons of war. I said that on a black radio network one time in answer to a question, and the irate blacks that called in, I mean, they were as bad as the southern rednecks, man.
Wow, they're in a category all their own.
They said, what do you mean? Of course Indians had war. And I said, listen, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that some stupid ass didn't get angry and break off a branch and club someone to death. I'm not saying that didn't happen. But I'm saying we didn't have war, or the concept of it, or the weapons to wage it. Yeah.
Right.
And so this is the things that I know. And there's another beauty about us that the white man won't allow the world to know, is we provided from the Western Hemisphere 75% of what the world eats. We are, in fact, because of our agriculture and our gene splicing, we are responsible for the population explosion of Europe, Asia, and Africa after 1492.
Fascinating. So, one time in an interview, I heard you, in a fairly recent interview, I heard you speak about what would happen should the Republic of Lakota, is that what you want to it's an appropriate name, how it would sustain itself, and the fact that you didn't want any taxes, and you really were making yourself separate and distinct, absolutely, from all of the rest of the United States, and rejecting most of the ideas that are commonly debated among white people back and forth and cause a lot of problems, actually. And, at first when I heard you say that, I thought, that's not possible. I mean, even I know you've got to pave the roads somehow. And then you started to talk about wind energy and other ideas, things that would bring in enough money that you didn't need to take from the people, rather to utilize that which was already there on the land of natural. Can you talk to me about that a little bit?
Sure. And when I was in the 9th grade in California, I took an economics class. They don't teach economics in high school anymore.
No, they do not. They also don't teach them to handwrite. Isn't that nice? I'm just saying, I'm a writer.
Cursory writing is dead.
You can print, exactly. It's really frightening.
Yeah, it's because of texting. Yeah?
Oh, don't get me started. I'm by far too old-fashioned. We'll get talking about all that and we'll never get to these things.
And in the 9th grade I learned those that control the energy control the economics.
Absolutely.
Wind is free, the sun is free.
That's right.
Hello? So that takes care of the basic needs. Right there. Warmth and power.
To an excess, actually. You were stating that because of you were stating that it was one of the finest areas for wind energy anywhere. And then you said there would actually be excess enough to sell off to other places. Is that
North and South Dakota have been referred to by wind energy experts as the Saudi Arabia of wind.
Really?
So,
the potential's unbelievable.
Class 5 wind is the best wind in the world, and we have Class 5 almost consistently.
Outstanding.
So, That's our reality. Now, unfortunately, in the same area, there's billions of tons of ore, of coal. The energy companies are not going to allow oil and coal to be usurped by wind or solar.
Right.
And curious about the plains. The sun shines on the plains 300 days of the year, over 300 days. So that we get plenty of sunshine to warrant solar energy. So it's, right, and the roads, when you live collectively, and this is what we have to convince non-Indians how to live in truly individual freedom. You rule by consensus. There's never a minority that suffers. So, if you absolutely disagree, you will not agree with the rest, then you move away. You move away to some place that people that agree with you, or you start your own little neighborhood. Your neighborhood can be 2 homes, or 200 homes, or 2,000 homes, as long as it's unanimous.
So that they're opting to live according to, of like mind, and to live like the way that they want to.
And no one suffers.
It's fascinating.
So that's how indigenous people have always lived. That's how matriarchy exists, through unanimity. Now, you can't have any power if everybody's agreeing.
Right, right. How do you know who will represent? How can you represent accurately a group of people who also have very different mindsets and ideas? How do you find representation? And how is that chosen among the people?
Through the old women. See, part of matriarchy is that the beauty of being a woman is you go through 2 changes of life. That's my phraseology. One where you become a woman, and the other is when you, she won't like this, but I would say ease into the change of life.
Change of life.
All right, which takes a number of years, but once the woman has gone through that, at least in indigenous people, they're the last word, those old women, because women live longer than men. And they're the purveyors of life. They create life, man. I just can't get over that concept that how can a woman be subordinate when that's who you come from?
Yeah. It reminds me of
Well, that's who you come from. She should be, just no doubt. Just no doubt who's the superior being. And who's blessed, who should be the prophets, who should be the wise women, not the wise men. But yeah, the old women have the last word. But you live in neighborhoods. You don't break that up unless you disagree. But you create another neighborhood of unanimity. So it's an understanding that you want your life to be happy. How can your life be happy if there's disagreement?
Right, right. If there's contention constantly, yeah. Absolutely.
So, the other thing about the death knell for matriarchy was because once patriarchy was born, patriarch brought forth convenience. For instance, brought forth the plow. Okay? Which created surplus. You had to do something with surplus, so you sold it, blah, blah, blah. And then you had to do something with the profits, so you created the banks. And guess what you've got? Empires. So, the only answer to patriarchy is matriarchy. and the patriarchs won't allow it. So, every religious discipline that I have come across in the world, and I've traveled the world, I've been on every continent except Antarctica, and I never plan on going there. Too many Americans. At any rate, what has become glaringly obvious among the people of the spiritual disciplines of the world is that there's going to be a cleansing of the human race again. There are some religious disciplines that there was one cleansing, the flood. Mm-hmm. There's others that say there's been dimensions. Mm-hmm. And there's others that say 4 worlds like ours. Mm-hmm. This is the 4th cleansing that's coming up. And we don't know if the human will survive. We do know that our grandmother, the earth, will survive.
Right.
Notice we call her grandmother. Mm-hmm. The ultimate being, insofar as humans are concerned. So, that's in essence what you know, it blows my mind that the patriarch is so stupid that you see, patriarchy depends on production. Mm-hmm. You've got to produce more Christians. You've got to produce more Muslims. You've got to produce more books. You've got to produce more iron. You've got to produce more energy. You've got to produce this. It's production. Mm-hmm. All right? In order to produce, you have to produce more people. And hello, you're not producing more worlds. They're just simple arithmetic. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you know you're heading towards doomsday. Mm. Simple arithmetic. Oops. But if you're a patriarch, you'll hoard it all up this paper money, hoping it'll feed you. Or the gold or the jewels, hoping you can eat them and drink them. At any rate, it's going to fall apart. Mm-hmm. It already is. Mm-hmm. And you don't even see it. Mm-hmm. That's not stupid, the patriarchy. Yeah?
It sounds to me, with the descriptions that you're giving and coupled with ideas I've had about this in the past, it sounds viral, does it not? If a virus enters the body, it uses up every resource it can from the host until the host itself dies, and then so does the virus, but it never sees the death of the host coming. It doesn't care. It just consumes as long as it can until
it dies.
Right. That's the way that I see most of the countries of the world behaving. Using. You're talking about production. All I could think about when you're talking about these things to produce is, yes, but where does all that come from? The earth. It's getting raped and raped and raped. Lungs getting cut out of my brother lives in Brazil with his family, and he goes, the deforestation is so much worse than it's horrid. They have laws, but nobody pays attention to them. So we're constantly, and I just don't understand how a handful of enlightened people from all walks of life, but I believe that I have to believe there's a handful of enlightened people that see this and say, no more, I'm not going to be a part of this. And they see what's coming. How did those people fight if you have a virus that invades the body and all of the virus just keeps behaving a certain way, and you have a few little enlightened viruses that say, yeah, I don't think we should be doing this, the host is going to go and so are we, how are they going to win? Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, it does seem very hopeless and kind of doomsday.
Well, that's the way it's going to be, because the patriarch's not going to give up.
It is chilling to me. It is incredibly chilling that there's no foresight. So, since we're talking about matriarchy, if you don't mind, I would really like to take a segue and speak with Mrs. Means. And I would love to hear when you're hearing all this, not just about the matriarchy, but about the struggles for so many years, about the loss of the culture, about the loss of language, about what the possible future is. What are you thinking? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, we respect our relatives' vision, so we don't try to impose. We recognize that we can only control our own behavior and our own path. We don't argue with life. That's why we're still here. As a woman, as a mother, as a grandmother, and as a wife, I'm very clear with what my priorities are. And as a giver of life, I'm charged with ensuring that life continues. So we as women have the innate ability to nurture, to know what can't always be seen or heard. We have that power from within, and that really guides and directs not only our lives, but our families, our community, our extended societies. So I think as women, it's very overwhelming. So all we can do is create change from within our family units and our communities. And I think one of the most important tasks that I have is raising a son, because only that's where the change begins with the next generation. How our males are going to view women. And it starts with the relationship with the mother.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think those of us that have sons, that's our greatest responsibility. I remember I have 2 daughters and I have a son. And when those daughters were 5 years old, I knew instinctively that they were very capable of taking care of themselves, families, and anything else that might come their way. And my son's very gifted, brilliant, has had every opportunity. And I still feel certain inadequacies and worry about, and I'm still mothering and nurturing when I do get to spend time with him. So I think that in our societies, indigenous societies, we're very comfortable with the roles that we have. There is a vast difference. We don't think alike. We don't analyze the same. But what we do is recognize those differences and celebrate them versus competing with.
I'm going to tell you something, and I would not say this except for what you just said. I hate feminism. I always have. I'm a businesswoman. I'm very independent. I have my own children. Unfortunately, I had to raise them alone. It was not the ideal, but it was the way that it had to be. So, but I always thought that feminism was always trying to insist upon something that I already had. It was trying to affirm itself in a way that I felt no insecurity about, and so I never understood it. Now, women's suffrage, absolutely. There are many women that are in a situation where they need to work sadly, they've got to take care of their families, and they're in a situation where they have to work and take care of their own children, and there is the absence of a father figure. And so there needs to be an equal pay, maybe higher, actually, I could argue. But women's suffrage and feminism is not the same thing at all. And I always celebrated and loved the role of the feminine figure, of the feminine energy in home. And we were raised to do that. We never felt uncomfortable about it or slighted or somehow it was less than. It was celebrated. But it seemed to me that feminism confused everything. It confused men. They didn't know what to do with a woman. They didn't know if they were going to get screamed at if they opened the door for her. They didn't know. It kind of created this strange kind of not world. And it was very much based upon the competitive behavior that you were talking about before. There's not a security. There's not a centering. There's not a you're a man, I'm a woman. These are our independent energies, and they need one another. But they certainly do not have to compete. They shouldn't even want to compete with one another. So that really resonates with me very deeply, because when you discuss that,
why would we want to compromise ourselves to be equal to a man?
I have no idea.
That's a step down.
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't say that in general, but I would say the way that she said it, yes, because it's asking a woman to be less than a woman, as it would be asking a man to be less of a man to try to be a woman or run the female role. It is a step down for either of them to try to be the other.
That's part of the confusion of Western society, is that they refuse to accept gender roles.
Yes.
It's not a bad word.
It's a unisex world out there.
Well, as soon as
Why? You know, it's not, but they try to pretend that it is, and it's confusing.
as soon as feminism raised its head, and the men were taken aback, as patriarchs were taken aback, and then they launched an offensive. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is watch television for that subliminal messages they keep sending to women. Mm-hmm. Now superheroes are women. Mm-hmm. You know, these 90-pound weaklings are beating the hell out of men, and they're superheroes. And they're out shooting, out fighting, and they weigh all of 110 pounds. Mm-hmm. And then and they got arms just a little bit skinnier than mine. And then they're ballyhooed if they're in the Olympics. Mm-hmm. All men's sports, all violent sports, all violence.
Absolutely.
And then in the commercials, they get women to start acting like men, like the male body is something to be, oh my God, you know. Like men do with women's bodies, you know, to look at you as a hunk of flesh.
Objectification, lack of soul. It's just objectification.
And so that's what they're doing with women, brainwashing them very subtly to act the male role. And it's masterful if you start watching it on TV. It's very masterful. And then you know what gets me about the .com revolution? There's nothing but men up there.
It's true.
That's a linear way of thinking. That whole convenience world that has created is all linear. Mm-hmm. Who always had the prettiest handwriting? At least when I was growing up, it was always women. It wasn't men. And now women have just as atrocious handwriting.
No, it's horrid, yeah. No, but I think it's also, well, there's a whole story behind this, but we'll talk about later, but it's expressive. And that's what I guess disturbed me the most, not just as a writer with them not teaching handwriting in school, but there is absolute scientific data that when you print versus handwriting, you think differently. It opens you, it's expressive, you start making your thoughts become more fluid, more like kind of stream of consciousness. When you print, your thoughts are logical, they're succinct, but they're disconnected.
Individual.
They are right. They are not linked in an artful way. And so when I found out they stopped teaching that, and I had to teach my own children how to handwrite, that it was really disturbing to me. Because it affects everything. I mean, think about when you're journaling, when you're writing your autobiography. I'm sure you're taking notes.
So that's another subtle brainwashing tool to get you to think the way men think.
It is, and I think it hurts men as well. I mean, it's not. It's taking away something. It's almost worse than that. It's almost as though it's training children to be computers. It takes away the art. It takes away the expression. It takes away the creativity. It takes away the stream of consciousness.
Creativity comes from the female mind. Yeah.
Well, that's why we have better handwriting. I want to talk to you about the subject of, and it's going to be very difficult for me to talk about without tearing up a little. So I just have to get a few of these really big conversations out of the way. I want to talk to you about the disease outbreak with the polio and the things that have been cropping up in Pine Ridge that is eradicated everywhere else in the United States, and we're seeing this now. Things that were completely dormant or dealt with, and you're seeing them crop up again. Right here in the center of America, which is supposed to be this great, incredible medical miracle place. What's happening there? What kind of breakdowns are happening to cause this kind of?
Well, first of all, let me preface that by saying, we challenge the United States of America every year before the U.S. Commission, well now it's the UN, the UN Commission on Human Rights. It used to be the Commission, now it's the Council.
That's interesting.
And we lay out these statistics. Well, then the United States comes back and says, this is how much money we pour into the reservation. This is how much money, and these are the programs we give to the Indians. But on health, it's always the ass end of health that they give to. Okay, they just built in my community a dialysis center. They didn't build a health and exercise center. Where they teach diet, healthy food preparation, how to shop on the meager funds that we have, how poor people can shop for healthy food. Lessons like that, which is needed in all poor communities.
Sure, absolutely.
But it's the ass end that they pour money into. They don't mind, and the reason they pour money into the ass end because then the medical profession and the drug companies get the money.
So how much is it, in your opinion, on the dollar, or as close as you can, it may not be your opinion, you actually may have all the data, of every dollar that's poured in to the Native American communities for healthcare, how much is actually getting there?
Well, okay. 80% of the healthcare of American Indians, just like for the rest of America, is taken up by Medicare. And 20% is supposed to be taken up by the monies allocated by Congress for health. That 20% is almost all taken up in administration.
Wow.
Because Medicare is for so you're allocated based upon the 20% that's given to a hospital on a reservation, you're allocated that kind of proportion of Medicare assistance.
So essentially, okay, so you build a hospital, they're obviously not, for the most part, going to be indigenous peoples that are working in the hospitals, I'm assuming. So even the wages that go to the hospital to run it are also they're not going to the res.
There's a saying on the Pine Ridge and on the Sioux Indian reservations and all the northern plains, Montana, North Dakota, Wyoming. The only reason to go to a hospital is to die. Because you're not going to get any specialized health care. Mm-hmm. And you have to have an advocate. Mm-hmm. Because the people that are on the Indian reservation are the ones that couldn't or didn't want to leave. And they have the colonized mindset that you don't question authority.
Right.
Okay? You just absolutely don't question it. So there's a lot of traditional Indian people left that they know to go to Indian Health Service is to go to die. Because they give you the medicines, the drugs from the drug company that you pay Walgreens for. Mm-hmm. You don't pay, and Walgreens is not on the reservation. So you have to put in gas, which that money leaves, and then you have to go to the store in the city, hundreds of miles away. The state of South Dakota, we do not pay on reservations. They have 9 Sioux Indian reservations in the state of South Dakota. We have no property tax. Mm-hmm. We're less than 10% of the population, yet we take up 25% of the South Dakota tax base.
Wow.
That's impossible. Mm. Unless you factor in all the monies the state gets. If the Indian reservations were abolished in the state of South Dakota, the state of South Dakota couldn't exist.
So why the systematic, slow, and to my mind, willful genocide when they really have themselves a cash cow? They're using, the government and its affiliated agencies or corporations or other groups that are in bed with them on these subjects.
Well, the Heritage Foundation.
You'd think they would at least kind of want to keep you alive so that they could rape you longer.
The Heritage Foundation and other think tanks have already figured out the end game.
And
the end game is that we're eventually going to have to take those resources that are on the reservation, what's left.
Ah, I see.
So we need the people off. So you make life miserable.
So the Indians don't exist, then all the rich mineral resources and everything else then belong to. And all the treaties go away because there's no one to keep one with. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. Well, I have to tell you, the Heritage Foundation is. I've seen a lot of things they were wrong about. But I have a feeling that they're probably pretty accurate on the overall goals of this one. I've been thinking about this interview for 2 years. This is the interview I really, really wanted to do because of the sensitivity of the subjects, because of your involvement in them, because for many reasons. I have 2 daughters. One of my daughters believes, when we had a crisis one time, and I said, "Are you all right, honey?" I was really worried about her emotionally. I was concerned about her. And I said, "Are you all right, honey? Do you need to talk?" And she said, "No, not at all." I said, "Are you sure?" And she says, "I'm fine." She says, "It's already written already." My other daughter, this one, she's not so sure. She thinks she plays a lot more into the hands of free will. She thinks that some things are written, but that there's a great deal of power in free will. I don't know which one is right. I would like to believe my first daughter is right. And it's already written already, and so it's going to be okay. But I can't believe that, because I do see acts of free will. I see the things that we're seeing now, systematic, slow, genocide, just enough to go under the radar, to still look responsible, pouring money into these reservations with an end game in mind. And then you've also got free will. You have people like yourself who have stood up and said, no, I see this and I'm not going to take it. I am going to speak out if it takes my whole life. I will never, ever, ever go away. You will hear from me every day. How does the great mystery play into this? When you think about this, which philosophy do you embrace? What do you see for the future? And how do you see this kind of this, it's almost a cosmic battle. It's almost not even a battle over land or rights. Because it's in between human beings. Well, at least one of them is. I'm just saying. What do you, when you look at this and you consider all of this, how much of your life has been pre-written? How much of it has been free will? What will it take for the future, for the next generation that you pour your hope into? And I also believe is one of the great answers, if there is one, if there's still enough time. When you look at all this, how much of it is written? Will that root ever be found? Will it thrive? Will it grow?
Well, I believe that the hunt for the root will continue. But the mosaic of life in our world, of all of life, is too interwoven. It's like Chief Seattle said, life is like a spider web. What happens to one strand affects all the strands.
Vibrations are felt everywhere.
So, with patriarchy being a suicidal action, what people are missing, the indigenous knowledge of our grandmother the earth. You see, with all environmental and stuff and everything, you have to understand everything starts in the water. Climate change has begun decades ago in the deepest recesses of the ocean. And slow through contamination, that those molecule reactions and changes in the ocean have finally reached the surface, and they're now beginning to change the currents. Everyone's worried about the gases and the fires and all of this, and they're ignoring 2/3 of us, which is water. Once those currents change, the entire weather changes, and it's in the process of changing now. So, you've heard of the weather systems named after the Spanish word for children.
Niño.
Yeah, Niño and Niña. Well, those weather systems are the first indicators of the changing the currents. Once it becomes permanent, that current that comes from the South Seas and warms all up in Japan, or along Asia, Japan, the Aleutian Islands, Alaska, and come down the West Coast, that's going to change and come down like to Hawaii to leave that cold. So that's what they're not explaining. Now, scientists in the environmental movement know this. Scientists and ecologists know this, and study these biological scientists and study these things. The other thing is, I know our grandmother of the earth is alive and well. Western science back in the 70s sank a shaft in Greenland, of all places, miles deep into the earth, and for years brought up data. With that data, they ascertained that the earth is a living being. Okay, fine. Then they ignore it.
Something you didn't know.
Yeah, but then they ignore it. Okay, if it's a living being, then why not take care of it? Well, then they ignore it. My point is, the government of the earth is now tired of the human being. She's tired. And all the indigenous people of the world are saying the same thing in different ways, but it is the same thing, that it is over with. And that she's going to, I don't know if she's going to get rid of all the humans or a good portion of them, but she's tired of us.
I think that's true. I really do. I do think that's true.
And it's happening. How else do you explain everything that's happening in the world?
Right. No, it's just too much. There's too much to be coincidental.
Exactly.
It's like she's just wants to vomit it all. You just wipe it out. You know, you're not only having, as you were describing, the current changes, but the magnetic fields doing crazy things, even concerns with reversals, which there goes everything. You have huge, brand new kinds of storms, new ranges of underwater volcanoes, new tsunamis. I mean, you're seeing these kind of, it's almost like there's an interior build-up of rage, and she just needs to let it out, and she will. And it's, I don't think, I think, I really, when I look at all of it, I wonder if we're just beyond the...
She's throwing out all these warnings. No one's listening. And the warnings get more severe, and say, okay. Well,
that's cheerful. On that note, you want to take a break and maybe get something to eat, and then we can continue with some more tomorrow? This has been really wonderful.